Imagine coming home from your corporate job at 6 in the evening, exhausted from an 8-hour shift of crunching numbers, only to find a sink full of crusty dishes, a mountain of laundry that isn't yours, and your parents sitting on the couch watching game shows while they wait for you to start dinner. This wasn't just a bad day for me. This was my reality for 20 years. My parents treated me like their personal, unpaid maid from the moment I was old enough to hold a scrub brush until the day I finally broke. And when I say I broke, I mean I didn't just walk out. I legally bound them to the debt they owed me. I placed a lien on their house, the very roof I had spent 2 decades maintaining, while they treated me like a second-class citizen. Was I wrong for finally demanding payment for 20 years of forced labor? Or would you have done the exact same thing if you realized your family saw you as nothing more than a household appliance? I need you to hear the whole story before you judge me, because this isn't just about chores. It's about a lifetime of manipulation that culminated in the ultimate legal revenge. Growing up, I didn't realize my life was different from other kids until I started middle school. While my friends were staying after school for soccer practice or drama club, I was under strict orders to be home by 3:30 p.m. sharp. If I was even 5 minutes late, I was grounded, which was ironic because being grounded just meant I had more time to do the floor-to-ceiling cleaning my mother demanded. My brother Leo, who is only 14 months younger than me, never had these rules. He was the golden child, the athlete, the one who was allowed to come and go as he pleased. My parents, Susan and Bill, had this unspoken rule that housework was women's work. But since my mom claimed her back was always too sore from her part-time receptionist job, that work fell entirely on my shoulders. By the time I was 16, I was cooking full 3-course meals for the family, doing everyone's laundry including my brother's sweaty gym gear, and scrubbing the grout in the bathroom with a toothbrush every Saturday morning. I remember crying into the soapy water once, and my dad just walked in, stepped over my legs to use the sink, and told me I missed a spot behind the pedestal. There was no "thank you," no "we appreciate you," just a constant stream of demands and the expectation that I would serve them because they gave me life. When it came time for college, I thought I'd finally escape. I had worked a part-time job at a grocery store since I was 15, saving every penny in a secret account my parents didn't know about. I applied to a university 3 hours away, got in, and was ready to pack my bags. But the night I showed them my acceptance letter, the atmosphere in the house turned cold. My mother started weeping, clutching her chest and saying her condition was worsening, and she didn't know how she'd manage the house without me. My father sat me down and told me that if I left, I was being selfish and abandoning my family in their time of need. They pressured me into staying local, going to a community college for my basics, and living at home, rent-free to save money. The catch, which I didn't see at the time, was that my rent was paid in blood, sweat, and tears. I spent my college years waking up at 5:00 a.m. to prep their breakfast and lunch, attending classes, and then rushing home to clean. I had no social life, no internships, and no peace. My brother Leo, meanwhile, was sent off to a big state school with a monthly allowance my parents provided. When I asked why he didn't have to contribute, my dad told me that Leo was building a future while I was learning how to run a household, which would make me a better wife someday. The real exploitation began after I graduated and got a full-time job. I was 22, earning a decent salary in accounting, and I told them I was moving out. My parents immediately had a crisis. They told me they were behind on the mortgage, that the house was falling apart, and that they couldn't afford a housekeeper or a contractor. They begged me to stay just 2 more years to help them get back on their feet. They made a deal with me, and this is the part that eventually became their undoing. They told me that if I stayed and handled the housework, and if I used my accounting skills to manage their finances and pay for the necessary home repairs out of my own pocket, they would eventually sell the house, downsize, and give me a 30% cut of the profits as a repayment for my service and investment. They even signed a handwritten agreement that I drafted, mostly as a joke at the time, but my dad signed it with a flourish, laughing about how I was such a professional. I spent the next 8 years, from age 22 to 30, pumping my hard-earned money into that house. I paid for a new roof, I paid for a kitchen remodel, I replaced the HVAC system, and I spent every weekend painting, gardening, and deep cleaning. I was their daughter, their maid, and their piggy bank all rolled into one. I didn't date, I didn't travel, I just worked and worked. Whenever I brought up the idea of them selling, and me getting my cut so I could finally start my own life, my mom would have another flare-up of her mysterious illness, or my dad would claim the market wasn't right. They were living like royalty while I was living like a servant in a house I was essentially subsidizing. The breaking point came last year when my brother Leo, now 30 and still the golden boy, announced he was getting married. He had spent his 20s traveling and blowing his money, while I had been the responsible one. My parents were ecstatic. At the engagement dinner, which I cooked and served, by the way, my father stood up and made a toast. He announced that as a wedding gift, they were going to give the house to Leo and his new bride. They told the room that they would be moving into a small condo they'd secretly bought with the money they saved, because I had been covering the home repairs and utilities for years. I stood there holding a tray of appetizers, feeling the blood drain from my face. I asked, "What about our agreement? What about the 30% and the reimbursement for the roof and the kitchen?" My father laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Honey, that was just a way to keep you focused. Family doesn't charge family. You lived here rent-free, didn't you? Consider it even." I didn't scream. I didn't throw the tray. I just walked into the kitchen, put the food down, took my car keys, and left. I stayed at a hotel that night, and for the first time in my life, I didn't clean up after them. The next morning, I went to my office and pulled up every single receipt, every bank statement, and that handwritten, signed agreement from 8 years ago. I am an accountant. I keep meticulous records. I had proof of over $150. Zero in direct investments into that property, not including the thousands of hours of labor. I realized then that they never intended to honor their word. They had used me for 20 years to build equity that they were now handing over to my brother, who hadn't lifted a finger. So I did what any good accountant would do. I consulted with a real estate attorney. I told him the whole story, showed him the signed agreement, and the proof of payment for the renovations. He told me that in our state, the signed document and the proof of sweat equity and financial contribution gave me a very strong case for a mechanics lien or a claim of equitable interest. I told him to move forward with everything. I wanted my money, and I wanted them to understand that my time and my life were not free. So that is where things stood. I had spent my entire adult life being the good daughter, the one who sacrificed everything for parents who were planning to toss me aside the moment my brother wanted a house. I was about to set off a legal bomb that would prevent them from transferring the title to Leo and would likely force a sale of the house just to pay me off. Before I tell you how they reacted when the papers were served and the absolute chaos that ensued during the legal battle, I want you to stop for a second. Put yourself in my position. You've worked for 20 years, paid for the roof over your parents' heads, and cleaned their floors, only to be told it was all for nothing while your sibling gets the reward. Would you have just walked away and started over from scratch at 30 years old, or would you have fought for every penny you were owed? Drop a comment right now and tell me if you think I'm being cold-hearted like my mother says, or if I'm finally standing up for myself. I'm reading the comments, so let me know what you would do. Now let me tell you about the fallout. The day the process server arrived at the house, I was sitting in my new apartment, which was small and empty, but it was mine. My phone started blowing up within an hour. It was my father, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. He called me ungrateful, a snake in the grass, and told me I was dead to him. My mother sent a barrage of texts saying I was giving her a heart attack and that I was a cruel, calculating girl who didn't understand the meaning of family. Even Leo called me, whining that I was ruining his wedding and that his fiancée was considering calling things off because they wouldn't have a place to live. He had the nerve to ask me to just drop it for the sake of his happiness. I told him that if he wanted the house so badly, he could pay me the $150,000 plus interest, and I'd be happy to sign off. He hung up on me. The legal battle wasn't quick, and it wasn't cheap, but I had the upper hand because I had the paper trail. My attorney pointed out that since I had paid for major structural improvements that increased the property value, and I had a signed intent for reimbursement, their rent-free argument didn't hold water, especially since I was also performing the duties of a domestic employee without compensation. My parents tried to fight it in court, claiming the agreement was signed under duress or that it was a joke, but the judge didn't find it funny. When my lawyer presented the itemized list of every repair, every appliance, and the market rate for the housekeeping services I had provided versus the rent I would have paid, the numbers were staggering. The judge actually looked at my parents and asked them if they had ever thanked me. They couldn't answer. In the end, we reached a settlement. They couldn't give the house to Leo. In fact, they had to sell the house just to pay me my 30% plus the reimbursement for the major renovations. After the legal fees were settled, I walked away with nearly $200,000. It wasn't just about the money. It was the fact that for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one losing. My parents had to move into that small condo they bought, but without the extra cash they expected from the sale of their old home, their lifestyle took a major hit. Leo and his fiancée had to get a 2-bedroom apartment, and last I heard, they are struggling because Leo never learned how to manage money or a household. The aftermath has been quiet. I haven't spoken to my parents or Leo in 8 months. They've been blocked on everything. Sometimes I feel a pang of guilt, wondering if I should have just let it go for the sake of family. But then I remember the feeling of that toothbrush in my hand, scrubbing floors at 11:00 p.m. while they laughed in the next room, and the guilt vanishes. I didn't destroy my family. Their greed and entitlement did. I just finally sent them the bill. I've used the money to put a down payment on my own place, a place I will keep spotless because I want to, not because I'm forced to. I'm finally living for myself at 31, and honestly, it's the best feeling in the world. I learned that family isn't a license to exploit someone, and loyalty has to go both ways. If you're in a situation where you're being used, please keep your receipts. You never know when you'll need them to buy your freedom. I hope my story serves as a wake-up call for anyone else out there who is being treated like a servant under the guise of family obligation. It's okay to set boundaries, and it's okay to demand what you're owed. If you enjoyed this story and think I did the right thing, please give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you're on my side. If you think I went too far by putting a lien on my own parents' home, I want to hear that too, so leave your final thoughts in the comments section below. I'm curious to see how many of you would have taken it to court versus how many would have just walked away. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of justice and revenge. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I'll see you all in the next story.